Oh, honey, let me tell you about that fateful Saturday night back in '85. There I was, hiding in the shadows of our old Buick, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, watching my husband of 30 years slip into that dimly lit motel on the edge of town. He'd told me it was just another card game with the boys, like every weekend for 2 decades. But as I peeked through those grimy curtains and saw what I saw, well, let's just say, the truth hit me harder than a freight train, and by morning, our whole family was turned upside down. But oh, the justice that followed? It was sweeter than my homemade peach cobbler. If you've ever suspected someone close to you was hiding something big, something that could break your heart but also set you free, then darlin', you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you've got a story of your own bubbling up inside. Subscribe so you don't miss more of these real-life tales from my rocking chair, and ring that bell for notifications. Settle in with a cup of tea, because this one's gonna tug at your heartstrings and leave you cheering for the comeback. Now, let me take you back to how it all started. Oh, my dear listeners, it's your old Grandma Hattie here, sipping on my chamomile tea in this coy little nook of mine, surrounded by faded photographs and memories that feel as fresh as yesterday's rain. I've got my knitting needles clicking away in the background, but today, they're gonna have to wait because I've got a story to share with you, one that's been tucked away in the corners of my heart for nigh on 40 years now. It's about love, betrayal, secrets that fester like weeds in a garden, and the kind of poetic justice that makes you believe in karma all over again. You see, back when I was a spry young thing, well, not so young, mind you, I was already in my 50s, but full of life and trust, I thought my marriage to Harold was as solid as the oak tree in our backyard. We'd built a life together, raised 3 beautiful children, and weathered storms that would have sunk lesser ships. But every Saturday night, without fail, Harold would kiss me on the cheek, grab his old fedora, and head out for what he called his card game with the boys. Poker, he'd say, or sometimes bridge if they were feeling fancy. I'd smile and wave him off, packing him a thermos of coffee and a slice of pie for the road. Have fun, dear, I'd call out, never once questioning it. Why would I? Harold was a good man, a provider, the kind who fixed leaky faucets without being asked and brought home wildflowers on anniversaries. But oh, honey, if only I'd known sooner what was really going on those nights. Let me paint the picture for you, just like I'm sitting right across from you at my kitchen table. It all started in the spring of 1965, when Harold and I were newlyweds living in a tiny apartment above the hardware store in Elwood, Tennessee. I was working as a school teacher back then, molding young minds with stories of history and grammar, while Harold labored at the mill, coming home with sawdust in his hair and a weary smile that lit up my world. We didn't have much, a second-hand couch, a radio that crackled more than it played, and dreams bigger than the Grand Canyon. But we had each other, and that was enough. Our first child, little Emily, came along in '67, a bundle of joy with curls like mine and eyes like her daddy's. Then came Tommy in '70, all energy and mischief, and finally Sarah in '73, our quiet little artist who could draw pictures that made your heart sing. Life was a whirlwind of diaper changes, scraped knees, and family dinners around a wobbly table. Harold was always there, steady as a rock, helping with homework or tossing a ball in the yard. But it was around '75, when the kids were getting older and the mill started cutting hours, that those Saturday card games began. At first, it was innocent enough. Harold's buddy from work, old Mr. Jenkins, invited him to a weekly poker night at his garage. Just the fellas blowing off steam, Harold explained one evening as he shrugged into his jacket. I nodded, understanding. Men needed their space, just like I had my sewing circle on Wednesdays. He'd come home around midnight, smelling of cigar smoke and cheap beer, with a few dollars won or lost, and we'd curl up in bed, whispering about our day. It became routine, like clockwork. Every Saturday, he'd leave at 7 sharp, and I'd use the time to bake or read or catch up on mending. The kids grew used to it too. Emily would roll her eyes and say, "Dad's off to lose his shirt again," while Tommy begged to go along someday. But as the years ticked by, little things started to niggle at me, like pebbles in my shoe. By the early 80s, Harold's card game seemed to stretch longer. Sometimes he'd stumble in at 2 or 3 in the morning, his eyes bleary and his stories vague. Lost track of time, he'd mumble, avoiding my gaze. The cigar smell faded, replaced by something sweeter, like perfume or lilac soap. I'd sniff his collar when he wasn't looking, but he'd laugh it off. "Must be Jenkins' wife baking cookies," he'd say with a wink. I wanted to believe him, Lord knows I did. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We had our spats over money or the kids' antics. Emily was a teenager by then, rebellious and full of fire, sneaking out to meet boys and arguing about curfews. Tommy was obsessed with cars, always tinkering in the garage, oil stains on his jeans. Sarah, our baby, was blossoming into a talented painter, her room a mess of canvases and colors. Amid all that chaos, Harold's Saturdays were his escape, and I didn't want to begrudge him that. But doubts crept in like shadows at dusk. One evening in '82, I remember it clear as day. It was a humid August night, the kind where the air sticks to your skin like honey. I found a lipstick stain on his handkerchief. Bright red, not my shade at all. I confronted him over dinner, my voice trembling. "Harold, what's this?" I held it up, my hand shaking. He glanced at it, then back at his meatloaf, fork paused midair. "Oh, that? Probably from the diner we stopped at after the game. Waitress must have brushed against me." His explanation was smooth, too smooth, but his eyes darted away, and my stomach twisted. The kids were there, wide-eyed, so I dropped it, forcing a smile. "All right, dear. Just be careful." But inside, a seed of suspicion took root. I started paying attention to the details, the way he'd hum a new tune on Sundays, one I didn't recognize, or how he'd buy nicer shirts, claiming they were on sale. Phone calls would come late at night, and he'd take them in the garage, his voice low and muffled. "Work stuff," he'd say when I asked. "Work on a Saturday?" The mill didn't operate weekends. By '84, the kids were growing up fast. Emily had met a nice boy, Robert, and they were talking marriage. Tommy was apprenticing at an auto shop, grease under his nails and dreams of owning his own garage. Sarah was in high school, her art winning awards, but she was withdrawn, sensing the tension in the house. I'd catch her watching Harold and me with those big, knowing eyes. Family gatherings felt strained, Thanksgivings where Harold seemed distant, staring out the window instead of carving the turkey. I'd bake my famous apple pie, the crust flaky and golden, filling the house with cinnamon warmth, but even that couldn't mask the chill settling between us. I confided in my sister, Mabel, over tea one afternoon. "Something's off with Harold," I whispered, stirring my cup endlessly. Mabel, ever the pragmatist, patted my hand. "Men get peculiar in their 50s, Hattie. Maybe it's a midlife crisis. Buy a sports car or something. But I knew it was more. My heart ached with unspoken fears. Was he gambling away our savings? Drinking too much? Or worse, another woman? The turning point came in the winter of '85. It was a blustery February, snow blanketing Elwood like a white quilt. Harold had been acting stranger than usual, snappish one minute, overly affectionate the next. He'd brought home flowers midweek, no occasion, and whispered, "I love you, Hattie," with a fervor that felt desperate. I smiled, but my mind raced. That Saturday, as he prepared to leave, I noticed his wallet bulging unusually. "Big stakes tonight?" I teased lightly. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Something like that." He kissed me goodbye, his lips lingering a second too long, and drove off into the twilight. I stood at the window, watching his taillights fade, a knot in my throat. The house felt empty. Emily was out with Robert, Tommy at a friend's, Sarah sketching in her room. I paced the kitchen, the clock ticking like a bomb. "Enough," I muttered to myself. "Time to know the truth." I grabbed my coat, scarf, and keys, my hands trembling as I slipped into the old Buick we'd bought second-hand years ago. It sputtered to life, and I followed the route I knew he took, down Main Street, past the mill, toward the outskirts where Jenkins lived. But he didn't turn left at the fork, he went right, toward the highway. My heart hammered. "Where are you going, Harold?" I whispered, keeping 2 cars back to stay hidden. The snow fell softly, headlights cutting through the flakes like knives. He drove for 20 minutes, longer than any card game route, until he pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Motel, a seedy place with flickering neon and peeling paint. I parked across the street, behind a dumpster, and watched as he got out, glanced around nervously, and knocked on room 112. The door opened, and a woman, tall, brunette, younger than me, pulled him inside with a laugh that carried on the wind.